This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
It sure is. In the night, playing with the shadows. That's us, all right. There has been a tremendous amount of interest, Peter, in the Todd Seas case. And so, if you would please, would you review that case? And I want everybody to listen to this very closely.
Yeah.
This is ominous stuff. It'll curl your hair. So
I don't know that we've ever talked about this one in any depth, Art, but it's the one that really curdles my blood. I am quick to admit that I don't know what happened there, but just a thumbnail sketch of what we know is the following.
Please.
On a Sunday morning, about 5 a.m., and this was on the 4th of August, 2002, so we're this almost 4 years ago. A gentleman left his home in Northumberland County, Pennsylvania, on a four-wheel vehicle, an ATV, all-terrain vehicle, headed up about 4 or 5 miles to his family land on Mount Montour. He was going up there. Originally, he was going to go with a hunting buddy. They were going to scope out populations of deer up on the mountain in preparation for deer season in Pennsylvania. Well, he did not show up at home when he was scheduled to later that Sunday, and his wife called the authorities, submitted a missing persons report, and before the day was out, some 200 people in a search party were searching for Mr. Seas, and in fact, they very, very quickly found his all-terrain vehicle up very close to the top of Mount Montour. I think it was on his land. On the back of this vehicle, it is reported in the newspapers, they found his outer garments neatly folded, I am led to believe, lying on the back of the all-terrain vehicle.
Yes.
It is reported that one of his boots was found tangled in the top of a tree, perhaps 60 feet off the ground or so.
Really?
All very strange stuff.
I'll say.
Now, what I didn't know any of this. I knew nothing about this case until probably about the 25th of August, roughly 3 weeks later. And somebody sent me an email saying, "Why aren't you pursuing this case?" And I said, "What case are you talking about?" The person elected to remain anonymous, but I had an email address. And the person shot back saying, "Well, the case of Todd Seas, of course. You have a report on your website about this incident." And I went to our reports, and lo and behold, there was a report that was so bizarre that I had posted it, but I presumed that it was a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
It was a report to the effect that 4 grown men had seen a disc hovering above Mount Montour and a shaft of light connecting the disc to the top of the mountain and a man's body being floated up into the disc.
Wow.
And I went back and looked at that report and looked at it with from a different perspective now, because Mr. Todd Seas was searched for all that Sunday. They did not find him. In fact, they had horses, they had tracking dogs, and the tracking dogs it is reported in the newspaper, I believe, not even the tracking dogs could find a scent of Mr. Seas leading from his all-terrain vehicle.
Perhaps that's because he went vertical.
Exactly. That was very unusual in the minds of the search party members.
Well, the shoe 60 feet in the tree. Was Mr. Seas ever found?
Also unusual. He was. His remains were found quite tragically. And they were found suspended in underbrush, according to the information available to me. He had a very unusual object clamped to his upper arm. I don't know what that object was, but people who saw it said it was very unusual. He was clad only in his undergarments, and it is reported to our center here in Seattle that the remains were so badly mutilated that apparently even perhaps his son could not recognize the remains as having been those of, or being those.
Good Lord. Have you been able to confirm?
Well, I have, Art. I'm anticipating what you're about to say, but all of what I have said has been in the local newspapers back in Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. There were probably approaching a dozen articles about this case in the local newspapers.
Oh, my God, that's human mutilation.
Exactly. Human mutilation. However, I cannot certify, cannot guarantee that there's anything unusual about this. I'm assured by the authorities there locally in Northumberland County that they're in full control of this case. The only problem is that I talked to the medical examiner who allegedly performed the autopsy on Mr. C's body.
Yes.
And he admitted to me that this was a very unusual case. He could not talk about it. When I asked him if an autopsy report would ever be published or released, he said no.
What?
When I asked him if photographs had been taken of the remains during the process of performing the autopsy, he said yes, but nobody will ever see them.
Wow.
And the other interesting aspect about this, which I'm unable to confirm, is that very shortly after these remains were found, and very shortly after the local police had satisfied themselves that they were probably the remains of Mr. C's, it has been represented to me, and I cannot confirm this, that the FBI was on scene very quickly, that they moved the police cordon off away from the body even further.
Wait a minute. Why was the FBI there?
Well,
that's federal.
The interesting question.
Yes.
It's a local homicide or accidental death of some variety. I don't know that foul play was involved, but the mutilation suggests almost certainly there was. And it would not have fallen under federal jurisdiction. There was no kidnapping across a state line, etc. Now, it gets even more interesting, Art. It is asserted that the some 200 members of that search party, who had just scoured the mountaintop. By the way, the body was found very close to Mr. C's house, only about 100 or 200 meters from the house he had left at 5 o'clock that Sunday morning. Well, the interesting thing is, it is asserted by people with whom I've corresponded, who allege to have been members of that search party, that all of the members of the search party were ordered to go to a local fire station where they were told that under no circumstance would they talk about this case or that search. And they were taken up there allegedly to have their health checked, quote.
Their health. Was there any reason given to not be talking about this?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Oh, is this weird or what?
It is a very, very strange story. We have, I placed a 2 or 3 page summary of just the facts on our website a number of years ago. It's generated a great deal of interest, a great deal of controversy.
I see why.
And I have no idea what happened to Mr. C's. It's just that it is all very, very strange. And I've read in Seattle papers over the last 2 or 3 years of similar cases in Philadelphia. There have been mutilation cases in Philadelphia, whether they're human-related or something else. I have no way of knowing. I haven't had...
Well, what hit me were 2 things, 3 things. The mutilation, of course, but the shoe 60 feet up in a tree, and then his body suspended over brush. I mean, come on, folks.
Yeah.
And then the dogs, 4 really, the dogs not being able to track from the vehicle. So he was taken vertically, a shoe got caught in a tree, and then he was obviously deposited or dropped from something. So, I mean, that adds up, Peter.
It adds up pretty well. It's just that I cannot confirm all of these facts, and the reason they can't be confirmed is that the autopsy report was sealed. None of the family members of Mr. C's, of the decedent, were summoned to positively identify the remains. In fact, the remains allegedly were returned to the family in, I'm told, a sealed coffin. They were forbidden from opening the coffin. No open casket.
This is just too much. There's got to be a way to follow up on all of this with family members, I mean, you don't get that from a medical examiner, sorry. I mean, by whose order is it not going to be made public?
Exactly. And my suspicion is there have been things done behind the scenes, probably not in conformity with the law.
The feds.
To cover up this case. And people criticize me for not knowing all of the details. I would point out that it's very difficult to know all the details of a case like this when the officials, the authorities, are covering them up.
Well, yes, is it not possible, for example, to follow up on what authority would the autopsy not be released?
Absolutely, it would be possible.
Okay.
If I were not receiving 50 reports a day, I would have been on this, and if it were not on the other side of the country. It was turned over to MUFON, and they had a new state director in Pennsylvania, an attorney, interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the details of to what degree he followed this one up, but